You're still in the game because you aren't dead yet. Written and narrated by Peter J. Merrick. Every morning before San Diego has fully opened its eyes, you'll usually find this old fart walking the streets with a coffee in one hand and a notebook tucked under his arm. It has become one of my favorite parts of the day. Before the emails begin, before the phone rings, and before someone else's priorities become my priorities, I give myself permission to think. Most mornings, I eventually find a place to sit and write. I never really know what I'm going to write about until I start, which probably explains why my notebook understands me better than most people. Apparently, this old fart needs to empty his head before he can fill it again. It is much cheaper than therapy, and so far my notebook has never interrupted me halfway through a sentence. One thought keeps finding its way onto those pages. If you opened your eyes this morning, your story is not finished. The older I get, the more I believe that simple sentence. If our purpose here was complete, I suspect we would not have been given another sunrise. There was a time when I believed life rewarded careful planning. I honestly thought that if I worked hard enough, worried long enough, and planned far enough into the future, life would eventually leave me alone, and life had other ideas. In the early 2000s, I came dangerously close to bankruptcy. Looking back, I was not just losing money. I was losing confidence in the man staring back at me in the mirror. Then came 2019. A serious health scare reminded me that tomorrow has never signed a contract with any of us. Funny how life can reduce all of our carefully organized plans to a single question almost overnight. Just as I found my footing again, COVID arrived. Like tens of millions of others, I watched years of planning collide headfirst with a reality nobody saw coming. I wish I could tell you I handled those years with remarkable courage. That would make for a wonderful story. It just would not be my story. There were mornings I questioned everything. There were days when getting out of bed felt like I had already accomplished enough for one afternoon. Apparently, this old fart occasionally hosts dramatic committee meetings inside his own head. Fear always arrives early, doubt refuses to stop talking, and optimism usually wanders in late, carrying a coffee and acting as though nothing happened. Thankfully, courage has never demanded perfection. It has only asked me to stand back up one more time after I had fallen down. Looking back now, I realize something I completely missed while I was living through those years. Every one of those storms left me with a scar, and every scar quietly handed me a lesson that comfort never could. For years, I believed strength meant avoiding pain. I thought if I could build my walls high enough, disappointment would eventually stop knocking on my door. I was wrong. Walls do a wonderful job of keeping pain outside. Unfortunately, they also keep opportunity, growth, adventure, and sometimes even the people who might have changed our lives out. Real strength is not measured by the absence of scars. Real strength is measured by the willingness to collect them and still believe tomorrow is worth showing up for. When I look back today, I no longer measure my life by the number of times I was knocked down. I measure it by the number of times life quietly invited me back onto the field, and I accepted. That is why people sometimes ask me how I managed to keep going. The truth is much less impressive than they expect. I simply realized I was still here. As long as I am still here, I'm still in the game. One of the gifts that comes with getting older is that you begin to recognize the teachers who quietly changed your life. Some taught me in person, some through books, and one of them through a movie that has stayed with me for more than 3 decades. In 1991, Albert Brooks starred in a film called Defending Your Life. On the surface, it was a comedy, but underneath the laughs, it asked one of the most uncomfortable questions I have ever heard. In the story, Brooks dies and arrives in an afterlife where his entire life goes on trial. The question is not how much money he made, how successful he became, or how many people admired him. The only question is this: did you live with courage or did you live with fear? That question has followed me for years. The older I get, the less I believe hell is a place, and the more I believe hell is reaching the end of your life and seeing all the doors you never opened because fear quietly convinced you to walk away. Fear is remarkably polite. It almost never tells us to quit. Instead, it whispers, maybe next week. Wait until things settle down, or you'll know when the time is right. Apparently, this old fart has learned that the right time has a terrible habit of never introducing itself. Not long after watching that movie, I found another teacher. Whenever life knocked me down, I found myself returning to U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt's speech at the Sorbonne in Paris on April 23, 1910. Every time I read it, I stopped feeling sorry for myself and remembered where life is actually lived. Roosevelt said that day, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." Every time I finish that passage, I come away with the same thought. I would rather spend my life collecting scars in the arena than collecting opinions from the cheap seats. Then Viktor Frankl entered my life through Man's Search for Meaning. Here was a man who survived horrors beyond anything I will ever experience. He had survived the Holocaust, yet he still believed that purpose always outlives our suffering. Frankl wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Every time I read those words, this old fart stops making excuses because my difficult days suddenly seem a lot smaller. Wayne Dyer, international best-selling author and psychologist, challenged me in a completely different way. His sentence, "Don't die with your music still in you," stayed with me long after I closed the book. It made me wonder how many books are never written, how many businesses are never started, how many conversations are never had, and how many beautiful ideas quietly disappear because someone waited for permission that was never coming. I promised myself I did not want to leave this world with my music still trapped inside me. Then Gandhi reminded me of something equally important: be the change you wish to see in the world. Those words are not about making speeches. They are about looking in the mirror each morning and asking whether the man looking back is becoming the man he hopes to be. Looking back, I realized none of these people gave me a blueprint for life. They simply handed this old fart another piece of the puzzle. Albert Brooks asked me whether I was living with courage or fear. Roosevelt reminded me that life is lived by those willing to step into the arena. Frankl taught me to protect my why. Wayne Dyer reminded me to share my music before I leave this world, and Gandhi challenged me to become the change instead of waiting for someone else to create it. None of them lived my life for me. They simply reminded me that I still had one to live. Those lessons eventually became my work. They are the reason Adrian C. Spitters and I wrote It Starts with Gold. Long before it became an international bestseller, it was simply two men trying to understand a financial world that seemed to reward illusion more than truth. Our next book, Killing Crypto, was born from the same place. It is not about attacking technology. It is about protecting individual freedom before convenience quietly replaces independent thought. Neither book came from theory. Both books came from scars. Collectively, Adrian and I have spent more than 70 years inside the financial system. We worked on opposite sides of the continent before life quietly arranged for us to meet. When we finally sat down together, we discovered something far more valuable than a shared profession. We discovered we shared the same values. That mattered. Knowledge changes, markets change, governments change, technology changes. Values rarely do. The more I look back on my life, the more convinced I become that opportunities are rarely built on talent alone. More often, they grow out of shared values, mutual respect, and the willingness to ask difficult questions together. That is what Adrian and I found. The books followed, the articles followed, the interviews followed, the friendships followed. None of those things were the goal. They were simply the natural result of two people who refused to stop asking questions. Apparently, this old fart has learned that asking better questions is one of the greatest forms of freedom we have. The moment we stop questioning is usually the moment someone else starts doing our thinking for us. That is why I write. I do not write because I have all the answers. I write because writing forces me to wrestle with the questions. Some mornings, I finish an article and realize I wasn't writing to anyone else at all. I was writing to remind myself of something life had already taught me, but that I was beginning to forget. If those words help someone else, I am grateful. If they encourage one person to think a little deeper, to question a little more, to laugh at themselves a little more, or to climb back onto the field one more time, then this old fart has done something worthwhile. I have lived long enough to know that life is not measured by the number of years we are given. It is measured by what we do with the years we have. None of us knows how many pages remain in our story. That uncertainty used to frighten me. It doesn't anymore. Now it motivates me. It reminds me to write the book, take the trip, make the phone call, tell people I love them, ask the difficult question, forgive when I can, laugh whenever possible, and keep showing up, because one day there will be a morning when I won't have another sunrise waiting for me. Until that day comes, I have absolutely no intention of living like I'm already gone. If I have learned anything from almost going bankrupt, health scares, disappointment, failure, friendship, success, and every scar life has given me, it is this. Life does not ask us to be perfect. Life asks us to participate. It asks us to get off the cheap seats, and it asks us to stop waiting for certainty. It asks us to step onto the field while the game is still being played. If you woke up this morning, you're still in the game because you're not dead yet, so play like it matters, because it does. Remember that life is a full contact sport. Peter J. Merrick, A.K.A. Old Fart. This old fart has discovered that the greatest tragedy is not leaving this world with a few scars. It's leaving it with a life that was never fully lived, because fear convinced us to stay in the cheap seats, because you refuse to go on the field of life and play your hardest.